Thank you again for coming today. This is a great day. Happy Ed Roberts Day to everybody. I hope you all had a day filled with advocacy and excitement, connecting with your local independent living centers, especially for those that also had device lending libraries. Hope you had a chance to visit some of their open house events. So I'm going to go ahead. My name is Derek Zarda. I'm the Assistive Technology Educator for Independent Living Resource Center, San Francisco. I started advocating as a youth with a disability in high school and co-founded the first disability advocacy student group in college. I do enjoy teaching independent living skills to youth here in the local high school areas, as well as enjoy serving on the city's Mayor's Disability Council. Also with us today is Stacey Milbern, who is the program manager for Center for Independent Living in Berkeley. She started out as a youth organizer who had been working in the youth arm of the disability rights movement since high school, and she's involved with youth activism and women of color media making. She is also a regular blogger on the popular disability blog known as CripChick. So continuing on to the next slide. So today we're here to explore the history of the independent living movements. We're here to learn about the role of the Independent Living Center in your local community, as well as discuss what it is exactly that your Independent Living Center can do for you, and also what you can do to get involved with them as well, some of the opportunities that can bring up. So we're here today because it is a wonderful day to celebrate the life of Ed Roberts, who was known as the father of the independent living movements for people with disabilities. Ed was, well, here in the Bay Area, he was a local guy who contracted polio at the age of 14 in 1953 and was actually the first students with severe disabilities to attend the University of California, Berkeley. Stacey will be talking a little bit more about some of that history and how that got started. But due to Ed and his fellow youth activists who were joining in with him, known as the group the Rolling Quads, they were able to put forth kind of a new advocacy movement on behalf of people with disabilities, demanding their fair share of rights and accessibility just like anyone else. So in 2010, the legislature here in California passed a bill to mark January 23rd as a celebration of Ed Roberts. And I'll hand it over to Stacey.
So the story of Ed Roberts is actually a really, really interesting one, especially to us as young people with disabilities. So Ed grew up and lived inside an iron lung. So an iron lung is kind of an old version of a modern day ventilator. And it actually looks like a big machine that you lay in, and it helps you breathe. So now we have tiny little ventilators where people can still move around in their wheelchairs and go out in the community. But back then you had to lay pretty flat on your back and stay inside of this breathing machine that encased your whole body. And so Ed lived inside of this iron lung, and he went to school, but he had challenges at school, so he decided to do a form of homeschooling. And when it was time to go to college, Ed went to the Department of Rehab and asked for them to send him to college. Department of Rehab is a service that allows people with disabilities to go to work, and they do things like supporting people in going to work by paying for college tuition or vocational supports, things like that. So Ed went to meet his DOR counselor, and the DOR counselor told him that he was not fit for employment and that they couldn't pay for him to go to college because he could never be employable. But Ed continued to fight, and with his mom, really advocated to go to college. And so finally he made it to UC Berkeley, Cal, and the only way that he could go to school there was by living in a ward that was kind of the nurse's office. And so while other students are living in dormitories and things like that, Ed was living in this ward. But he was very active and met a lot of people, and then soon other wheelchair users like Ed also wanted to go to Cal, and they started moving into this ward too. And so Ed, in college, he and other people with disabilities saw the need for creating a place where people could go for support. And he and his friends started what we call the Center for Independent Living. And originally it started as a way to support students on campus who had disabilities, but soon they were also serving the Berkeley campus. And kind of a funny story is DOR was the agency that told Ed he would never be employable, that they couldn't even spend any money on him because he was too disabled. He would never hold a job. And he actually became the director of DOR when he was about 36 years old, and ended up becoming, you know, the highest level of boss for the same people that told him, you know, you'll never be able to hold a job. So it's just a really interesting story, and talks about what it's like when people don't see our potential, but what happens if you keep believing in your own self and pushing forward and advocating for what you deserve. So next slide. So as Derek said, we're here to talk about what independent living centers do. We wanted to start by talking about the historical context of this work. So a lot of YO disabled and proud members are really active in disability history, and we've seen the way that young people have identified the next level of or era of disability rights movement to be focused on making sure people with disabilities know about our legacy and know about where we come from and know, you know, that we're not alone. And disability history is definitely a part of that. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So for many, many hundreds of years, people with disabilities were kept in back rooms and out of the public eye. It was even, you could receive a fine if you went out in public, and they were called the ugly laws. So we were to be kept out of sight because the idea of disability was grotesque to many. And part of being kept out of sight was that we often had to live in institutions. So one way people said we should live in institutions is because we needed such a level of care that we couldn't get that from mainstream community. But the disability rights movement has done a lot of work around that, and we see integration more and more every day, and more options for community living. There's also a history of eugenics, which was a movement and political ideology that said people who are considered unfit, so people with disabilities, people of color, low-income folks, that we should be eradicated by kind of phasing us out of society. So that was a lot of focus on involuntary sterilization and really, again, figuring out how to erase and get rid of those who are considered undesirable. So that's kind of the context of the disability rights movement is people with disabilities being considered unable to contribute to things, or unworthy of support, or ugly, dirty, shameful, all of these things. And then when we come to the independent living movement, in the 1970s, it was such a radical concept that disability is nothing to be ashamed of. Disability is a natural part of the human experience. That the problem isn't around our bodies or our disabilities or the way we think, but it's about how society treats us. So we call that the social model of disability that says the problem is not with the person, but it's with a society that refuses to accept that person. And so early disability rights activists really focus on how can we change the environment to be accessible, and really push for the idea that everybody should have self-determination over their own lives. Everybody should be able to make choices and manage their supports regardless of disability or level of disability. And they do that by coming together and rallying together and supporting each other. And one way that independent living centers do that now is through the peer model. So sometimes they call it peer support or peer counseling. But the idea is that people with disabilities have a really unique insight on what it means to have a disability that other people can't even comprehend sometimes. And so we're the experts when it comes to disability. And if somebody's facing an issue, sometimes another person with a disability is the one that's most equipped to help them. And it was also really radical because it also said that disabled people or people with disabilities were capable of working, and independent living centers are required by law to be led by people with disabilities. And so the idea that we could lead organizations and have jobs and support other people, you know, that's kind of, unfortunately, is still a big idea in and of itself. So the independent living movement was started in the early 1960s by UC Berkeley students. So I talked earlier about Ed and his friends, and they're the ones that started coming together and saying, like, no, there should be more to life. Like, people with disabilities should be in the community and not in back rooms and shelter workshops and institutions, but we should be out in the world, and we should have the right to control our own lives. A lot of these ideas were rooted in other civil rights struggles. So UC Berkeley was a school where there's all kinds of social justice ideas happening. We see a lot of feminist work that started there. Black Panthers were connected, you know, in the Bay Area. All kinds of liberation movements. And the Center for Independent Living, which came out of the independent living movement, was the first place where people with disabilities could really advocate for themselves and find ways to live in the community. So next slide, and Derek.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for such a comprehensive background of the IL movement. And so when we talk about the IL philosophy, what are we talking about there? Independent living philosophy. Basically, what this boils down to is the fact that everyone deserves the right to have self-determination and exercise choice. Basically, when you're working with somebody, when we work with people here at the Independent Living Resource Center, as do other centers here in the state and the country, we don't work from the social work perspective of, you know, we talk, they listen, they talk, we listen, but more so it's kind of that power dynamic of we're just trying to address some needs. From the independent living philosophy, we're working with people on the peer model, where they're coming to us as a person with a disability. We are talking with them as our own personal person with a disability, and we work with them, and we respect their choice. We don't try to cut short their goals. We don't try to tell them what they can and can't do. We look to find resources and guide and establish steps that they can take and that we can take together to reach their goal. But it is all done at their direction. And this is kind of a radical belief, really, when you think about how a lot of other social welfare organizations are run, more so that by not really highlighting, respecting, and encouraging a person's direction or for them to take charge. They're not really learning some of the skills that come when it's time to try to advocate for themselves. So it's kind of a nice way to empower the individual while at the same time working with them on the same level. And it also at the same time highlights the fact that people with disabilities can be professionals. Just by our very existence here in this center, where we have 90% of people on staff, people with disabilities, myself included, it also kind of highlights just enough, like, hey, you're here in the office, you're here doing this. How does this, work? Because a lot of times it can be hard to find individuals with disabilities out in the professional workforce, or have people come by to schools and talk about this experience. So when they get a chance to interact with people, see people from the movement, taking on professional job duties and so forth, it really does highlight that the sky is the limit sometimes. Continuing on. So yeah, when, as I kind of just mentioned there, we do operate from the peer model. And this is, in effect, also empowering because it kind of creates a safe space. A lot of times when you're going out somewhere and somebody might ask you a question about your disability or your background, you may not be so forthcoming with information. You may not feel so comfortable as to really get into detail, or kind of relax up a little bit and really kind of open yourself up to what's really going on. But here at the Independent Living Centers, we really do kind of strive to create a safe space so that people can know that this is a place they can come to talk with us about their needs, talk with us about how their life is going, and really receive, not just encouragement, but a sense of direction, and a feeling of kind of like a home or a home base that they can always turn to, no matter what's going on in their lives. So an Independent Living Center is our private nonprofit corporations that are, this is taken from the definition that they have, a private nonprofit corporation that provides services to maximize the independence of individuals with disabilities and the accessibility of the communities they live in. We are funded in part by grants and funds from Department of Education, the Rehabilitation Services Administration, and among other types of funding resources to provide advocacy, information and referral, independent living skills training, and systems advocacy. And when we were talking about information referral, what that means is that it's not just a case of a person comes here, asks us a question, and we can't answer it. More so that it's built into our core services that we are a natural 411, if you will, an information hub for our local and state area, as well as on the federal level. So that if there's a need that's trying to be met that we can't reach, that they're not going to walk away empty-handed. They're still going to be provided with resources and steps that they can take to get their needs met. When it comes to the advocacy portion, developing independent living skills. What does this really mean? Talking about how to be able to survive and thrive independently on your own in the community. A lot of times that can be the first step, getting out into the community, depending on what your circumstances are. So for you, coming out of high school, if you're going, trying to get into college, or if you're trying to go whatever next step is on after high school, there's going to be a lot of soft skills you're going to need to learn. Whether it's how to live on your own, how to look into the housing search and apartment search, how to look into employment, how to look into preparing for a job interview, how to look into, how to discuss your disability if it does come up, when and if to disclose that you have a disability depending on your disability. All these questions and more kind of form around the independent living skills portion, so that basically we can help you advocate for your own needs and be able to talk to other people in a way that does help you get your needs met. And then when we come down to systems advocacy, this is a crucial component for independent living centers. It lets us be able to work on a local level, state level, and federal level on following any type of legislation that deals with or affects people with disabilities. So whenever you're dealing with an instance where a local bill comes out and you happen to raise a barrier for people who use the sidewalks, who use power chairs, or who are just using wheelchairs to get on sidewalks, that would be an issue where we'd use systems advocacy to talk to our local policymakers. We would talk to the people who we elected on the local level. We would talk to other community members to make sure there's change that can be made. So it's really important to be able to have that component for ILCs, so that it's not just about working with the community, but also watching out for and trying to stay ahead of any type of political change or legislation that can have a negative impact on us, but also looking towards creating working with other organizations around positive legislation that we could possibly encourage as well. So also, though, it depends on what agency you're with. You might have additional core services. Those can include housing referral, at least we have here in California, as well as personal care attendant referral for those who receive in-home support services hours per month to have a personal care attendant help them in their daily living.
And
others.
Derek, this is Stacey. I was just going to add. So as Derek said earlier, most independent living centers, their main funding is federal funding through the Rehab Services Administration. But California really believes in the work of independent living centers, so there's actually state money available too. So we call the federal money 704 money, and then the state money 204 money. And part of getting the 204 state money means that you have to add these additional core services. So all independent living centers who receive 204 money must add additional services. But if you go to another state, their core services are going to be the main four that Derek talked about.
Thank you, Stacey. And so continuing on, as far as requirements to be an independent living center, you're required to have, amongst the board of directors, must be 51% persons with significant disabilities. The majority of decision makers in the organization must be persons with disabilities. The consumer control philosophy must be put into effect on all levels of the organization. And then you have to, of course, make sure that the specific core services are provided, as well as Stacey mentioned, so if you're getting state funding, as here in California, that those additional core services are also being met. And Stacey, did you want to cover this next portion as far as what an ILC can do for you, or do you continue?
Yeah, definitely. So in addition to the services that Derek mentioned, a lot of ILCs may also offer other kinds of services. And that's really dependent on what is the need of the local community and what resources are available. So for example, here at CIL we also have a travel training program. And not many ILCs have that, but if you're in Alameda County and you need to learn how to use Bus and BART, we have 4 different trainers who would be able to tell you how public transportation works. So first thing that you should do to find out what an ILC can do for you is just call and ask. When you call, you want to tell them what are some of the issues you're facing and see if they have programs that might be able to assist you. And then probably make an appointment or attend an orientation and meet with someone to tell them what your day-to-day life is like and what you would like more support in. So this is where if you're facing any specific challenges, you would want to share that information. The way independent living centers work is that it's all centered around what we call an independent living plan. So when people come in, they tell us what kind of goals they want to work on, and we work together to create an independent living plan that talks about what the goals are and then what the individual is going to be doing to meet those goals. So the first thing is call and ask or go online and check out what they offer. Second thing is go in and talk with somebody, and then if you're interested in services, create an independent living plan. And ILC is able to offer a, Derek used the word safe space earlier, and that's definitely true. So we're able to usually create a positive environment for people with disabilities. Most ILCs really embrace disability as diversity. So there's some independent living centers, especially in California, who do things like host Disability Pride Day or Disability Mentoring Day or events around disability history. And what these are about is saying there's no shame in disability, and that can be such a relief when you are, you know, kind of on your own and in the mainstream world, but maybe feeling different or an outsider, to come to a place where you are wholly accepted and celebrated, and people work with you to figure out what your strengths are and how you can really leverage those strengths. And then we also offer guidance and resources. Derek talked earlier about information and referral. So being able to call and say, hey, I need to know what are the food banks in my area. We can get you that information. Or how do I apply for community college and get disability services? We can get you that kind of information. Okay, next slide. So what can an ILC do for you? What can an independent, well, let me change that. What can you do for an independent living center? So we're seeing more independent living centers become interested in youth leadership, but there's so much work to do. So some independent living centers have youth programs. Many don't. So one thing you can do is call and find out if your independent living center has a youth leadership program. And if they don't, maybe you can help them set one up. It could be something small at first, maybe a weekly peer group of young people coming to work on goals, or maybe it's a formalized project where you apply for funding and host conferences and events. It could be anything you want. A lot of youth leadership programs right now are focusing on teaching disability history in schools. So step one is that you can ask if they have a youth leadership program and then take a role in it. The second thing you can do is independent living centers are always looking for volunteers. So let's say you are passionate about something, or you have a skill that you want to share or a skill that you want to develop. You could apply to be an intern at your local independent living center and really help them by offering your skills. So for example, at the ILC I work at, there's one young person who is really passionate about photography, and she used to be in yearbook club. And so she's our photography intern, and she goes to all of our offices and takes different pictures, and when we have events, takes different pictures and things like that. And of course, photos are such an important part of fundraising and development and outreach that having her as an intern is, you know, a really big service for us. Another thing you could do is blog for the independent living center. A lot of ILCs have websites and they need content. So if you have a story that you want to share or some thoughts about a recent event, you could ask if you could blog for your local independent living center. You could meet with the management about how they can support youth leadership. So if you have ideas about what needs to be done, you can reach out to them and share your ideas. Another thing you can do is help do outreach to young people. So if you know about what the ILC services are, do you know other young people who would benefit from the services? And so really sharing the word so young people can be served too. And then the final thing you can do is invite your friends to be active. And active can be anything. It can mean going to events, going to community town halls, going to fundraisers, participating in programs, but invite people to participate and really learn about what the Independent Living Center is doing. So Derek, do you have anything you want to add before we go to Q&A?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind real quick just kind of giving kind of a quick story about how I got started here at the Independent Living Center in San Francisco. I moved out here from the Midwest about 3.5 years ago from Kansas City, and on the advice of my of the executive director of the Independent Living Center in Kansas City, who I'd come to see just a few times, they said, go to your local ILC like the first day you arrive. So on the first day I arrived, it was late, so the next day I got up, went down here, asked them, what can I do? And they said, well, we actually have a meeting coming up next week. Why don't you come on down to it? You can introduce yourself, and we can go from there. And from there, I went to more meetings that talked about a variety of issues. Some were related to community events, some were relating to local advocacy, and some related to youth advocacy. But I didn't really have a clear idea of what role I could play yet or what I could do as a volunteer, but I still just went down anyway. A lot of times, what I see here too with the interns we get in, they're not, how do you say, kind of born and bred, you know, social butterflies getting out there and spreading the word, and that's fine. You can contribute to your ILC, you can participate in your ILC, and still do some really meaningful volunteering with whatever you're comfortable with. And the best part is that you can grow into more roles when you stay active with us. I've worked with youth over these past few years who were at first really shy, and now they have become much more encouraging on their own to go out and, you know, go out into the community, go do presentations in schools, be more active in the local advocacy movements, be more active in raising a voice when they are present, when something is not going right or something is, they can tell something's up and not right for themselves or for other people with disabilities. And that is something that I actually want to drill in here at the end, that you can really grow into your own as an in your volunteering with an ILC, and that's what I learned personally too. You know, even if I didn't know at first what I could do, just by simply going down there and just saying, hi, I'd like to help somehow, I'm just not sure, you know, you can really kind of grow stronger and more self-independent just from coming out to volunteer. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek and Stacey. So right now we will open up to questions and answers.
Well, this is Stacey. Can I jump in real quick?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Go for it.
Oh, so I was just going to say I had a really similar story to Derek. I got involved in the independent living community when I was 18 years old. So that feels like so long ago now. But I started first it was a youth group, and then it became a statewide youth organization. And I didn't know anything until I got connected to the Independent Living Center. And that was in North Carolina, and the local ILC executive director really mentored me. And from there I moved out here, and the first thing I did was get connected to CIL. So I even contacted CIL, I think, before I even moved here. And they were able to help me do things like get a ramp for my apartment and learn how to use the bus and get some assistive technology I needed. And that was the first time I lived by myself. Before then, I lived with my parents, and my family did all my care and met all my needs. So ILC has been really instrumental to who I am as a person. And yeah, I'm just so appreciative for the independent living movement.
Thank you, Stacey. I guess now it's time for some questions and answers. If anybody has any questions for Derek and Stacey.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Monica.
Okay, I'm making a support group at my Napa Valley College here, junior college, and I'm trying to find people who may be interested in joining the support group. I know a couple of people, but the problem is I'm not really sure how I can persuade people or convince other people to join the support group because I know that many people at the college are busy. What are the many things I can do to convince?
That's a great question. Derek, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I would say try to look at the way that you are framing your group. Is it strictly just a support group? Could it be something more than that? Could it be, at the very least, if you think more in broader terms of just, here's a group, for students with disabilities and or students interested in disability culture, and it can include, support for people for students with disabilities. It could also include, a social component where you guys can go out and do social events, partner up with other groups on campus. Try really, when you're doing your advertising too, to highlight just being able to come together and socialize with your peers, because that is something that a lot of people would make time for in their schedule if it was framed like that. If the framing of it was more just, here's a support group, we really strongly encourage you to join, that might take off of like, well, I'm really busy right now with my own work, I may not need a support group right now. And so I think by broadening your message and kind of, further opening up what you define your group as, opening it up to social events, opening it up to just, what is the main reason I want to come here? Is to connect with my peers, to learn from one another, have fun, grow stronger. These type of things, I think, if you describe it as such, might help you in your advertising for it. Also, looking towards similar groups on campus that might have a situation that's similar to yours. For my situation on our campus, we joined up with the LGBT group on campus known as the Queers and Allies groups, and we partnered with them on some events, and we also partnered with other multicultural groups too. And we saw ourselves connecting more and more with other students by working and connecting with other student groups. So.
This is Stacey. I would also just encourage you to really think about who are you wanting to outreach to and what are the challenges that they might face in their life. So for example, earlier I talked about travel training, and actually there's a lot of shame around travel training, like admitting that you need support in learning how to use 6-hour transit, or even sometimes public transit is even a little stigmatized. So when we were doing outreach to that, we talked about what are some of the big challenges that are relevant to people who need travel training. And we realized that one was feeling safe in public. So we decided to host a workshop on safety and self-defense in public. And it was really popular, and from there we were able to tell people about travel training and get people involved that way. So sometimes it isn't necessarily obvious, but if you can think about what are the needs of the people that you're trying to outreach to, then you can often strategize around that. And the other thing I would just say is we do a lot of work around advocacy and trying to learn skills and work on goals, but it's also really important just to have fun. And so if you can mix up fun things with your events too, that's oftentimes a way to get people involved. So for example, CIL has a project here where we really try to promote the Olmstead decision, which is a Supreme Court decision that says people with disabilities have the right to live in the community. But it's actually really hard to get people excited about a Supreme Court decision that nobody knows about. So we decided to have a big party, and it was free for everybody, and the theme was Party Like It's 1999, because that's when the decision was passed. And we had over 200 people, and that's how we launched that community organizing initiative. So if you can kind of mix it up and introduce new things, that can also really work when doing outreach. And good luck, Veronica. That's really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, very awesome. Are there any other questions for Stacey and Derek? Stacey and Derek, are there any last things you want to say before we wrap up the webinar?
This is Stacey. All I want to say is happy Ed Roberts Day. Hope everybody's doing something to celebrate.
Definitely. Happy Ed Roberts Day, everybody.
Hi, this is Derek, and yes, happy Ed Roberts Day to everybody. I just want to add that when it boils down to it, especially going back to connecting with your community, it really is about finding what brings us together, and now it really makes us stand apart. When you're looking to, whether it's trying to start something at your school or coming to an ILC, knowing that you are a person first with a disability, knowing that there's more to you than that, even if some other people around you get experiences where they see you only as your disability, knowing that ultimately you are more than that, and it's what brings everyone together. So when you're going out there, when you're growing and meeting new people, knowing that there's a lot out there that you have to offer, and kind of just working from that perspective. And happy advocating.
Is there any other last minute questions? Alrighty, well, I just wanted to wrap up this awesome webinar. Thank you so much, Stacey and Derek, for presenting this today for us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope everybody has a great day, and happy Ed Roberts Day.